You are listening to the Hero's Journey podcast. I'm Dan Zarzana.
And I'm Jeff Garvin.
Play ball!
That's not the... You have to say the other thing.
Let the journey begin. Welcome to the show. If you're enjoying the podcast, here's how you can show us. Take a moment to share the Hero's Journey on social media. Text your movie and book-loving friends. Go online. Leave a show review and a rating.
This is episode 6, Field of Dreams.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
We are going to say things about the plot and stuff. So if you listen on, even though you haven't seen the movie or read the novel on which it's based, we are not to be held responsible for your emotional distress.
Field of Dreams was released in 1989 by Universal Pictures. It was written and directed by Phil Alden Robinson and starred Kevin Costner, Amy Madigan, James Earl Jones, and Ray Liotta. Other notable performances include The West Wing's Timothy Busfield as Mark, the real estate buying brother-in-law, and Lee Garlington as Beulah. Field of Dreams was based on the 1982 novel Shoeless Joe by W.P. Kinsella.
Field of Dreams was nominated for Best Picture, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Original Score by James Horner. Driving Miss Daisy beat it out for Best Picture and Best Adapted Screenplay, and Little Mermaid won that year for Best Score.
Look at that stuff. Isn't it neat? It was also nominated for Directors Guild and Writers Guild Awards, a Hugo Award, and Gabby Hoffman won the Young Artist Award, but it was totally snubbed by the Golden Globes. A note about the title. So the film was shot using the name Shoeless Joe, but
Right.
The studio insisted on the title Field of Dreams. Now, the director, Phil Alden Robinson, didn't like it. He wanted to stick with the novel title, but the studio wasn't having it. And later, the author of the book, W.P. Kinsella, told Robinson that his original title for the book had been The Dream Field.
Right.
And then the title Shoeless Joe had been imposed by the publisher. I just think it was interesting that, like, the director wanted to stick
flipped it
with
around.
this. Yeah, and
Yeah.
It, you know, as publishers have pretty much say over the titles of things, as do movie studios. So it's really interesting that that title went through from the author wanting a title to the movie ending up having a similar title.
Right. One of the reasons the film studio wanted to change the title from Shoeless Joe is because test audiences said that Shoeless Joe sounded like a hobo.
Right. Yeah, I get that. You have to know something about who Shoeless Joe was to care that it's...
Yeah, exactly.
And baseball is such a big part of this movie that to not have the word field in there, I can see where they were coming from. So a couple other tidbits, and I want you to know, Dan, that I went outside of IMDb and Wikipedia to find these other tidbits. So I don't want you throwing your fake news label at me.
Oh my God.
So apparently Matt Damon and Ben Affleck were extras in the Fenway Park scenes. Mm-hmm. And then Affleck, who was later in The Sum of All Fears, which was directed by Phil Alden Robinson, and he went up to him on the set and said, "Hey, great working with you again." And Phil Alden Robinson
What do you
was
mean
like,
again?
"What? Yeah, what?" Another tidbit, in the movie, James Earl Jones plays reclusive author Terrence Mann, but in the book, it's J.D. Salinger, whom Ray Kinsella essentially kidnaps. In fact, in the movie, Ray's last name, Kinsella, is not just the last name of the author in the book. It's also the last name of a J.D. Salinger character. He's one of Holden Caulfield's oral expression classmates in The Catcher in the Rye, and he also appears in a short story that Salinger wrote called A Young Girl in 1941 with No Waist at All. That was an interesting little tidbit.
Yeah.
Without further ado, let's dive into Act 1. Act 1 begins with the ordinary world, or the world of common day, in which we see our main character in his status quo normal life. The opening sequence of Field of Dreams is Kevin Costner's voice over a montage of family photos, 8mm home movies, and newsreels, giving us the backstory of our hero, Ray Kinsella. He was raised on baseball and had a troubled relationship with his now deceased father, who played in the minors for a very short time. And in the present day, Ray is married to Annie, and they live in a town in Iowa with their daughter Karen on a farm they just bought.
I think it's important to note that early on in this montage, it is revealed that when Ray's father, who was a single father, Ray's mother died when he was 3, so
Right.
Ray's father raised him alone. But when they moved to New York, Ray was a Brooklyn Dodgers fan.
Yes.
That's very important to note.
Very important.
Right now, seeing as how I'm wearing a Dodgers baseball cap right now.
That's very important. Do you have anything else to add to the World of Common Day?
I do not.
Other than the very important addition that he is a Brooklyn Dodgers fan. Well, and it's funny because he points it out to say that his dad was a Giants fan?
Yankees fan.
His dad was a Yankees fan, and so he rooted for the other team to like antagonize his dad.
Yeah.
Which is really at the heart of this, the key relationship in this movie is the father-son.
Yes, sir.
So even though you brought it up to bring glory to your Dodgers, it was a significant part that I should have mentioned. So
That's
I
right.
appreciate that.
Segment 2 of the hero's journey is the call to adventure. The first act of this film is fast.
Oh my God, it's fast.
The call to adventure takes place at the 4-minute and 30-second mark.
Yep.
And that includes the Universal Pictures logo at the beginning.
Yeah.
And a few seconds of music over a black screen. So there's parts of this that aren't even movie. And within 4 minutes and 30 seconds of the start of this film, we have the call to adventure, which is Ray walking through his cornfield, and he hears the voice.
I wrote down the exact same thing, how quickly the call to adventure happens.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think we've had this conversation, but it always ends up getting cut out because it's such a meta conversation, is how in a screenplay versus a novel, in a screenplay, there's a great deal of rigor around the structure. You have to get certain things accomplished by page 15 of that screenplay.
Yeah.
And then you only have so many pages to get to the next part. And then you really only get 15 pages for a third act. You've got to cram through, especially the top of a movie. And I was stunned to see 4 minutes in, here's the call to adventure.
Beyond the montage at the beginning, the call to adventure is the first line of film dialogue.
Yes. I don't think in 2018 you could get away with the opening sequence of montage of family photos and backstory. It's gone by the wayside as an acceptable way to open a film. You don't see that as much as you did in the 90s. And I think it happens because there's so much literary stuff in a novel that's hard to translate in dialogue and action that you really need that backstory to make this movie work. And I think they compensated by going, here under the credits, here's all this information, and then boom, call to adventure. And so if you were turned off by voiceover or montage, you don't have enough time to be turned off before, if you build it, he will come. And you're like, what is happening in this movie? So great.
Our preceding episode to this one was Ready Player One.
Right.
That novel starts very similarly to the film of Field of Dreams, where it's essentially a prose prologue.
The difference to me is Ready Player One, that prologue is the call to adventure, but in Field of Dreams, the prologue is backstory. And that's what I was trying to point out during the Ready Player One episode, is that now you can tell me backstory, but you have to fit it in after you capture me with the call to adventure.
Yeah.
This movie is extraordinary, and I've not read Shoeless Joe, but I bet the first chapter is about I grew up and blah 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 blah, and then if you build it, he will come.
Refusal of the call.
Confronted with fear of the unknown, our hero refuses to engage in the adventure. Here's my take on refusal. Ray hears the voice, and he calls out to his wife Annie and asks, "Hey, did you hear that? What was that?" And she doesn't hear it. Mm-hmm. And then back in the house before they have dinner, they're talking about it. Ray brings it up, and they discuss it, but neither of them is taking it very seriously. They're making jokes about it. They're kind of dancing around this very serious thing, which is Ray, who is a mostly sane person, has heard a voice.
Mostly.
Well, I mean, he's hearing voices in the field, right? So at this point in the movie, if you know nothing about this movie, and he's the only one who's hearing it, you have to kind of question that. And so the two of them are, I think, in a very realistic way, discussing like, so you didn't hear the voice. And she's saying, what do you think it means? And then there's another great little moment in the refusal. Karen, their daughter, is watching an old Jimmy Stewart movie on TV, Harvey, in which Jimmy Stewart's character claims to hear the voice of an imaginary rabbit. And Ray turns off the TV and he tells his daughter, that man's sick.
Right.
This is him rejecting.
Yeah, only crazy people hear voices.
Side note, according to a website I found called Mental Floss that has a lot of really cool pop culture stuff in it, Jimmy Stewart was the original choice to play Moonlight Graham.
Yeah.
And he turned it down.
And in Roger Ebert's review of the film, he said, this is the kind of movie that Frank Capra would have directed and Jimmy Stewart would have starred in.
Yes. And it would have been great to have Jimmy Stewart play Moonlight Graham, although Burt Lancaster.
Burt Lancaster was great. The next phase is...
Wait, so I just want to be clear that we've made it through 2 straight phases with no disagreement here?
Yeah.
Oh, this is bad.
And so it begins.
This is bad.
No, it's not. We're getting there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's gonna blow up big time. This is like the quiet before the storm.
So now we're getting into supernatural aid, or meeting with the mentor. I put supernatural aid at the top of my little segment notes here because I think that is much more appropriate a title for this section.
Huh.
I don't feel like Ray has much of a mentor beyond the voice. It's not just the voice. There's some supernatural elements to this film. When Ray is in his cornfield and he hears the voice again, he sees a vision of the baseball field with a lone player standing in center field. So because he hasn't figured out if you build it, he will come, what that means yet, he's getting a vision as well as the voice.
Right.
That is some supernatural aid telling him, okay, here's what you need to do. Build a field right here in this spot.
Yeah. So when I was looking at this section, this meeting with the mentor,
I just wanted to mention a supernatural soundtrack element.
Ooh.
When Ray is confessing later that evening to Annie about, here's what I think it means, and it sounds crazy, but the song Daydream by The Lovin' Spoonful is playing on the radio. I thought that was pretty appropriate.
The music choices, not just the score by James Horner, but the source music in this movie is extraordinary and brilliantly picked, as is the clip from the Jimmy Stewart movie. So I agree, the voice is a mentor. I think Shoeless Joe behaves as a mentor in several parts of this movie.
You don't really know that that's his role until the end, I think.
I agree. Karen, the daughter, is a mentor in this movie. She has 2 moments where she's trying to talk and she gets shut down. Ray and his wife are talking about the voice, and Karen says, "Daddy," and he says, "Not right now, Karen." And then he continues his argument with Annie, and then finally Karen goes, "Daddy, there's a man in the field." So she's the first one to see Shoeless Joe.
That's not a mentor. She's heralding. She's heralding the appearance of Shoeless Joe. That's not a mentor.
I gotta fast forward to the end to disagree with you here.
Okay.
In the very end of the movie, when they're sitting on the bleachers, and Ray is arguing with Mark. Mark is trying to convince him to sell the farm. Karen's the one who says, "You don't have to sell the farm. People will come."
Yeah,
she's the one that brings that idea up, and
that moment, but not.
And when she brings it up, Mark tries to shut her down, and it's Kevin Costner who goes, "Wait, she's got something to say," and it's a callback to that moment when he shut her down at the beginning of the movie for saying Shoeless Joe's here. I think this is important because this movie is all about dreams coming true, pursuing your dreams, believing in yourself. And the innocence of children, they don't see any boundaries between themselves and their dreams. My son says, I'm going to be an astronaut, inventor, rock star. He doesn't. There's no limit.
He's going to be Buckaroo Banzai?
Yeah, he's going to be Buckaroo Banzai. And so I think it's important to see that the child is teaching the adults something in this movie. So I will dig my feet in that Karen has mentor energy in this movie.
I agree with you, but it's the last. I can't get on board with her being a mentor at the beginning when she just says, "Daddy, there's a man in the lawn." There's no mentor energy there at all. She's just saying there's somebody on the lawn.
I disagree because while he and his wife are arguing about how real it is, she just sees it. And so she brings him out of his intellectual arguing directly into the energy of acceptance. So we disagree about that. So good. So at least there's some tension now. And
there, we broke the ice. Are you happy now?
You mentioned the song Daydream. Ray is talking to this old man at the hardware store and asks, "Hey, do you ever hear voices, while you're out in your farm?" And the old man tells everyone in the store, "Hey, Ray's hearing voices." And all of a sudden, Ray is confronted by his whole community looking at him like, "You're a crazy dude."
Yeah.
And the song Crazy is playing on the radio in the background. So the voice speaks to him again in the field, and Ray asks what it wants. And that's when he has that vision of the baseball field you already mentioned. Ray tells Annie that he's worried he's turning into his father, who got old early. He was an old man by 35, and he never followed his dreams. He played baseball for 1 season, and then it didn't work out, and he quit. And he's afraid he's going to turn out the same. He's afraid that he's not going to pursue his dreams, and he feels like building this baseball diamond is his way of not becoming his father. And he says, "Do you think I'm crazy?" And she says, "Yes, but if you think you should do it, you should do it." In that moment, Annie is a mentor.
Yes, I agree with that. It's a far stretch, I think, explaining why he's going through with this. Because I don't want to be like my father and not do anything. So I'm going to plow my field and my corn and make a baseball field. I thought it was kind of a weak explanation for here's why this guy's going to bankrupt himself to do this crazy thing. I love the movie.
Yeah.
But there's a lot in it that are huge leaps of faith and huge stretches of logic, and that's one of them.
Yeah, Annie is almost the perfect wife character because she's so supportive right from the get-go.
Yeah.
They did not focus on the tension that really could have caused in a marriage.
Right.
But to call back to your point, this is 13 minutes into the movie.
Yeah.
This is happening very fast.
Right.
crossing the threshold. The hero must pass a barrier to enter the special world, and the crossing represents the hero's commitment to taking on the adventure. More than most of the projects we've covered, this is an unusual story. I mean, I think Handmaid's Tale was the one where we were just banging our heads against the wall going, where do the pieces fit? But in true 80s movie fashion, to follow on the tales of Ready Player One, the crossing of the threshold here is a montage. Ray is telling his daughter all about Shoeless Joe and the White Sox and baseball as he mows down the corn, puts up the lights, builds the bleachers.
And that moment begins exactly 14 minutes and 0 seconds.
Yes, there's that 15-minute mark. Act 1 is over.
Yeah.
It is on.
Yep.
And now Ray has fully committed to the adventure. He has built the field. He has crossed the threshold.
One of the elements of crossing the first threshold are characters known as threshold guardians that try to prevent the hero from taking this first adventurous step. Mm-hmm. And as Ray is plowing his cash crop, his neighbors are surrounding his field with their cars. They have lawn chairs, binoculars, and they're watching this man do what he's doing.
Right.
And they're saying things like, he's plowing his field, the damn fool.
Right.
He's going to lose his farm. They're not confronting him directly, but they are expressing that threshold guardian energy of saying, this is a bad idea. You shouldn't do this.
Yeah, they are.
But Ray's doing it anyway.
They are the personifications of the culture that he is going against.
Once the field is done, Annie and Ray are having a picnic at night, and they're talking about how Ray's father once saw Shoeless Joe playing baseball again many years after his suspension in some kind of a 10th rate state league. He'd put on a bunch of weight, and he wasn't really as fast as he used to be, but he could still hit. And Dad always said, nobody can hit like Shoeless Joe. And he smiles. And Annie says,
I think that's the first time I've ever seen you smile when you mentioned your father.
And I thought that that moment was a bit of a crossing of a threshold into Ray having positive memories of his father and wishing that he could reconcile, wishing that the information that we learn later about what happened between the two of them, wishing he could take that back and fix that problem, but he can't because his father has passed.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit of an emotional crossing of the threshold for Ray, I felt at that moment too.
Yeah, well said.
That's the end of Act 1, Jeff. That was fast. It's fast in the movie too.
I sense so much anger within us and conflict unexpressed. So we'll see
how
Act 2
we are passing into Act 2 now, which is my least favorite section of every episode we've done so far.
It's my least favorite part of the writing, too. So this Act 2 is fraught with danger.
Oh, boy. All right, so we're going to take a little break here, and we will be back shortly with Act 2. All right, Jeff, so we got a break in the action. Team is changing the pitcher. So while we're waiting for that, tell me what you're reading.
I'm between drafts, so I've been reading voraciously for like the last month, and I love it. I finished a really great debut novel by a woman named Emily Ziff Griffin called Light Years. It's about a girl named Lou Ochoa Jones, and she has this weird sensory condition where she experiences strong emotions as sensory flashes of light and smells and sounds. And
interesting.
It takes place a little bit in the future. There's a plague that has struck, and so millions of people are dying. And she's a coder who invents an algorithm that takes photos on the internet and compiles people's reactions to them, their likes, their comments, and it creates an aggregate word cloud so you can look at the photo and see what most people are reacting by demographics. And she uses this technology to help fight the plague in a way that's totally unpredictable. And it's like if Stanley Kubrick were alive, he'd direct the movie because it's so visual and interesting. So that was really enjoyable. Wow. I met Nikki Grimes, who's an award-winning author for the last 20 years, and I got to read her book, Bronx Masquerade, which is like 18 different characters growing up in a high school in Brooklyn, and it's about racial tension and identity, and it's basically a 150-page poetry slam from all these different characters, and it's extraordinary. And then I read And Then This, the novella by Kevin Stanek, founder of 1888, and I really dug it.
Oh, yeah?
His writing is so literary. It makes me envious. And he gives himself room just to write his thoughts. And it's kind of like a mystery, but it's got a very French film ending where nothing's resolved. And I really enjoyed it.
Wow, nice.
How about you, Dan? What have you been reading?
Oh, thanks for asking. You all right there? Swallow the coffee. I've recently become involved with a wine-themed book club. My wife and I very often travel up into Central California wine country, and we visit a lot of wineries up there. One of our favorites has a book club that meets once a month. So a couple of weeks ago, I went up there and participated in what was their third and my first meeting. We had read a book called In Vino Duplicitis by Peter Hellman. It is about a wine counterfeiter.
Ooh.
His name was Rudy Kurniawan. He was a young Indonesian immigrant to the United States.
Is this a nonfiction book?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just a few miles down the road in Arcadia is where he lived and operated. He would go to wine auctions and buy millions of dollars of wine at a time. Again, this is a young man. He was in his early 20s, mid-20s perhaps, which was unusual for the regulars at these wine auctions to see this kid come in and buy huge dollar amounts worth of wine. But he was very generous with his wines, too. He would host dinner parties at expensive restaurants in Los Angeles, invite really high-powered, influential wine industry people, and open rare bottles of wine and share them with everybody very freely. Rare bottles of wine are often kept in cellars, almost like works of art.
Right.
They're not consumed.
It's like a cachet thing. Like, I own this and I'm cool, but
Right.
you're never going to drink
It's a bragging rights thing at some point because it is so expensive.
Yeah.
When you've got a bottle of wine that's 70 years old and there's maybe a dozen of them left in the world,
Wow.
it takes some cojones to rip the cork out of that thing and drink it, because then you've just destroyed
Right.
that one. Yeah, and that just increases the value of the remaining bottles of wine.
Right.
No, it was interesting to read that book and see where he misstepped and ultimately led to his downfall. And now he's spending 10 years in Taft prison.
So he took these bottles of wine and then essentially copied them somehow, like chemically?
Yeah, his palate was so sophisticated that he could take other wines and kind of mix them together to produce a wine that apparently tasted so much like what these wine critics and wine tasters remember a certain, like a 1949 Chateau Lafite tasting like, that they believed that was the authentic product. And then they would buy other bottles
Fascinating.
from this guy.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a fascinating book. And I'm looking forward to reading the next one for the club.
Can't wait. Oh, I will say one other guilty pleasure thing that I've done, because I used up my Audible credits. So all my favorite podcasts, like I listened to all the episodes. So I went back and I listened to 11/22/63 by Stephen King again.
Oh, wow.
God, I love that book.
Who narrates it?
An actor named Craig Wasson. He was in Body Double. That was like kind of his big break. Incredible narrator. Like, does an absolutely great job with a very difficult book.
Cool.
Well, on that note, we're going to take a break and we'll be back with Act 2.
No, we're not taking a break.
No, we're done.
We're
This
just
is the
going
break.
right into Act 2.
Yeah,
This is the break.
That's true. Bye.
Act 2 begins with the Road of Trials, or as Christopher Vogler calls it in his writer's journey, tests allies and enemies.
You've always been partial to Road of Trials from episode 0.
I just like the name.
Yeah.
Once having traversed the threshold, the hero moves into a dream landscape where he must survive a succession of trials. So that dream landscape really dug its claws into me this time when I was rereading some of Campbell.
Yeah.
A year has passed, and it is summertime again, and still no sign of who he is supposed to be and when he will come.
Summertime has come, but the living is not easy.
Karen is watching a baseball game on television, which clues us into the fact that a year has passed. Because first we see the snow and the Christmas party, and Ray looking mournfully out his window at the snow-covered baseball diamond that was once his cornfield.
Yeah.
The announcer of this baseball game, the team of which is the White Sox, by the way, his dad's favorite team when he grew up in Chicago. And the announcer is saying, of the pitcher, his summer of woes continues, as it does for Ray.
Interesting.
So once again, the director managed to find...
You would never notice it watching it for the first time, but it has, it has this cumulative psychological impact of putting you in the world.
Yeah. During that scene, Ray and Annie are sitting at their kitchen table, they're analyzing their budget, and they're realizing that they don't have enough money.
Yeah.
During that discussion, I thought it was really interesting. A hint at the marital woes is Annie tugging on her wedding ring while they're having this discussion. She's pulling it a little bit off and a little bit on, and a little bit off, and she's fiddling with that wedding ring.
Whenever I see moments like that, I always wonder, is it the actor or is it the director?
Right.
Or was it in the script? In those moments, remembering my own very limited filmmaking experience, you always shoot the wide shot first. So there they are at the table and you're shooting the wide shot. You're getting a sense of what the actors are going to do. And then you go close. It makes you wonder, did the director see her doing that and go, yeah, I'm going to go close on that. Those things fascinate me.
All part of the process that the viewer never knows about, and a lot of people probably never even saw it.
Right.
A lot of people probably never even heard the TV announcer about the baseball game saying, "And a summer of woes continues."
Right. It's those little details that all together create an experience.
During this discussion, little Karen calls out to her father. This is where you were introducing Karen as a mentor energy, where she says that there's a man on the field.
Right.
And now Ray is faced with the reality of the magic coming true. He doesn't question that this isn't really Shoeless Joe Jackson, that this isn't just some man from town who has put on a baseball uniform and is wandering around his baseball field at night.
Yeah.
He walks up and he's just like, that's Shoeless Joe Jackson. A man who's been dead for 50 years.
We dove right into essentially the tests part of the Road of Trials. We didn't do our typical thing of identifying allies and enemies.
Well, because I was going Road of Trials, not Vogler's tests, allies and enemies.
Gotcha.
But go for it.
Well, among the allies, Annie is chief ally.
Certainly.
Karen, who has those two great moments we've talked about, and the wisdom and clarity that only the innocent can possess.
Yeah.
And then I think Terrence Mann becomes an ally. He's a hard-won ally, but I think he becomes an ally. And then Moonlight Graham and the ball players become allies.
As for enemies, Mark and his two business partners who want to buy the farm.
At least through most of the film, the way he shows up is that he means well, that he's trying to take care of his sister.
Right, yeah.
And
Mark is Annie's brother.
And he wants to not have his sister lose the farm. I do see one other enemy, and she only has a small scene, but Beulah, who is trying to ban the books of Terrence Mann. She is outraged. She's turning politics back 30 years. And Annie gets up and confronts her and calls her a Nazi cow. It gets really ugly. They have this confrontation. And the reason I bring up Beulah is that she is essentially a threshold guardian times 10. She is the societal force that is pushing back, not just on Ray, but on Annie for supporting him. In that PTA meeting, as once she's confronted about the books, she turns it personal and says, well, you're married to the crazy farmer who mowed down his field. So we start to see the cost to Annie and to their family of now they are pariahs.
I guess we'll go into tests.
Right. And you've already, I think, nailed the first test, which was surviving that year and taking the farm into financial dire straits.
And the next one is the introduction of Shoeless Joe. And how is Ray going to handle this appearance of essentially a ghost on his field? James Horner's score during this scene is so ethereal and has such a magical quality to it. It kind of makes the hair on my neck stand up. Ray goes outside. There's no words exchanged between the two of them.
Right.
Joe just takes a position in the outfield and he takes a ready stance.
Yeah.
Wordlessly saying, hit some balls out to me. And the music is swelling. James Horner's magical ethereal music is playing, and Kevin Costner's Ray grabs a bat and a ball, and he flubs it. He hits a little dribbler.
Shanks it.
5 feet in front of the plate, and it's just like the magic is gone at that moment.
Kevin Costner's performance in this movie is so tender and subtle. His embarrassment in that moment is so palpable.
So then he and Shoeless Joe play a little back and forth baseball.
Annie's brother Mark offers to buy the farm, and Ray and Annie laugh. They have no intention of selling. Karen interrupts that conversation to tell, hey, the game's on. And of course, this is when we see for the first time the 8 suspended White Sox players are now on the field warming up. Mark and his wife and Annie's mom can't see the baseball players. Now, this is the first time we see that there are people who can see them and people who can't. The other rule that gets established during this part of the movie is that Shoeless Joe can't leave the field. I think that's a test that they both pass and fail because they're living in their own reality now as far as we know. We don't know what the rules are now, who can see it and why. I would say that the next test is Ray hears the voice again, and this time it says,
ease his pain. Ease his pain? What the hell does that mean, ease his pain? What pain? Right? Whose pain?
After that is when they go to the PTA meeting that I talked about, right? Of course, Terrence Mann gets brought up, and Ray is like, I know now. I know what I have to do. I have to go find Terrence Mann.
And again, that's one of those, you just got to go with the flow, because why does Ray feel like, just because they're at a PTA meeting and the books of Terrence Mann are being discussed, why is it Terrence Mann?
Yeah, it's such a coincidence. Why does it happen to be Terrence Mann?
And Annie after the PTA meeting is saying exactly that. Like, why Terrence Mann, what does he have to do with baseball?
Yeah.
Which is a test to Ray. Now, you've got to go figure out what Terrence Mann's connection is to baseball.
It's a test of their marriage, too. And the thing that I love about it is on this staircase, once they're home, they're arguing about this. And she's saying, look, this is different. You can't just drive halfway across the country. This isn't.
Yeah.
And then they discover that they've had the same dream. Exactly the same dream
Right.
of Ray and Terrence Mann sitting at Fenway. I teared up at this part when she's like,
Oh, really?
You got to go pack.
Yeah, I'll help you pack, yeah.
In my marriage, I'm the crazy creative dreamer. And so I probably over-identify with Ray in this movie because he's like, I'm compelled to do something. I don't have a good reason. I just know I have to do it. And here's this amazing, intelligent woman who's just like, I'll help you pack. That
Right.
is so, I just get emotional about it.
And the reason Ray needs to go to Boston is because he just feels that he has to take Terrence Mann to a baseball game because something's going to happen.
Yeah.
He doesn't know what. There's nothing that gives him any indication about why he has this feeling. It's just a gut feeling. It's probably that supernatural force that is making all of this happen, teasing his subconscious.
It's worked so far. He built it. Shoeless Joe came.
That's where I then switch into Approach to the Inmost Cave.
Oh, interesting.
And this is where you and I always disagree.
Well, I'm still in
So I'm
tests.
done with tests.
Okay. Then you go on, and I'll just put a pin in the fact that I'm still in tests here. And I totally get where you're going.
Approach to the Inmost Cave is where the hero begins preparation for the ordeal. He travels to Boston, finds Terrence Mann, and tries to convince him to go to this baseball game with him. They have a very James Earl Jones is not up for this.
He's not down or up.
No. It's a funny scene.
It's so satisfying to see characters attempt something that they're totally unprepared for. He just goes and knocks on his door.
Yeah.
And Terrence Mann is kind of like the guardian at the gate in The Wizard of Oz. No, you're not getting in here. No way, no how.
And slams the door. Ray finally just pushes the door open, and he's got his finger in his coat pocket. He's like, all right, no, you're coming with me.
I was hoping I wasn't going to have to do it this way.
What the hell is that?
It's a gun. What do you think it is?
It's your finger.
No, it's not. It's a gun.
Yeah, let me see it.
Get out of here. I'm not going to show you my gun. Now, look, I'm not going to hurt you. I just need you to come with me for a little while. And what are you doing?
I'm going to beat you with a crowbar until you go away.
Eventually, Ray convinces Terrence Mann to go to the baseball game with him. And one of the most laughter-inducing moments for me is when they pass by the concession stand. They order 2 hot dogs and 2 beers for $7.
Oh.
I call BS. So they're watching the game, and during the game, Ray gets another message. And he looks over at Terry, and Terry doesn't appear to know what's going on. And so Ray's like, oh, well, I guess you didn't really need to be here, so we can go. One moment I thought was interesting when Ray is driving Terry home is the camera is on James Earl Jones as they're driving down the street, and a blue neon sign for a bookstore passes over Terrence Mann's figure sitting in his passenger seat. The word books in big blue letters, and it drops out of the bottom of the frame.
I reacted to that shot so strongly, and I watched it over and over again.
So you've put this sequence in tests.
Yeah, so for 2 reasons. One is that I think Terrence Mann is an ally, and I think to jump into Approach before we've met the allies is premature. And then the other thing is the moments where the voice reaches out to him, those are all tests to see if he'll go farther.
Okay.
And so my approach begins here. In Vogler speak, it's the hero reaches the edge of a dangerous place where the object of his quest is hidden. He takes Terrence to the game. He sees the Moonlight Graham sign. But when Ray drops Terrence Mann back at his apartment, he's making a U-turn to head back to Iowa. And there's Terrence Mann blocking his way. And he says,
Moonlight Graham.
You saw it.
So what?
You saw it. New York Giants, 1922. He played 1 game. He never got to bat. You saw it.
What did I see, Ray?
Chisholm, Minnesota. God damn it, man, we were the only ones who saw it. Did you hear the voice, too? It's all right to admit it. It's what told me to find you. Did you hear it?
Terrence Mann is still refusing to believe what he saw.
right. From Terrence's perspective, he's given up on believing in anything. He has abandoned his idealistic 60s crusade. He just wants to be left alone.
Right.
And he doesn't want to get sucked back in.
Yeah.
And he's getting sucked back in.
And in fact, as he is exiting the van, he says, "I wish I had your passion, Ray."
Yeah, but he can't let go.
Yeah.
So he stops Ray and he says, all right, we have to go to Minnesota.
And he is just as baffled about it as Ray was when Ray heard his first message.
But you can also tell in
Guess we're going to Minnesota. What?
throughout the rest of the movie, in James Earl Jones' performance, you can see this childlike delight. Like when you first meet Terrence Mann in the movie, he is grumpy and pissed off, and now
angry
he's
at the
like,
world.
he's excited about something again.
Yeah.
One baseball side note: I did play on a team, a little league team when I was a kid, and I did play on the Red Sox, and I was terrible. I was like the worst left fielder in the entire league.
You were bad and they put you in left?
I'm sorry, right field. I was a right fielder. See, I don't even know enough about baseball to know why I was there. But I did get to sing the national anthem at Fenway Park when I was 10. I was in a boys' chorus. I got to stand in front of the Green Monster.
During a game?
Yeah.
It was a pregame?
Before a game.
Wow.
Yep. The All-American Boys Chorus, went to Boston, and so I've sung the national anthem at Fenway.
It's
the closest
pretty great.
And it probably was around 1988, or it was like right before this movie was made, oddly.
Interesting. I remember when I was a kid, well, maybe I wasn't a kid. Maybe I was in high school or college at that time. Anyway, my dad and I went to Anaheim Stadium to watch an exhibition game between the Angels and the Titans of Cal State Fullerton, which eventually became my alma mater. I don't remember what the score was, but I remember at one point now batting for the Titans, Kevin Costner. And I was like, that's weird that there's a baseball player playing for the university team whose name is Kevin Costner. No, it was really Kevin Costner, and he had suited up with the Titans, and I don't remember what year this was, but it was preparation for a baseball movie that he was doing. I don't think it was this one. Because,
probably Bull Durham.
No, Bull Durham was before Field of Dreams.
Oh, so this was after 89? Of course,
It might have been, was Love of the Game? Was that Costner?
I don't know.
I think that was Costner, where he played a pitcher. Anyway, I just thought that was
your point
an interesting moment. I've seen Kevin Costner play baseball against a professional baseball team.
Wow. So the approach to me is after they get to
Chisholm, Minnesota.
Well, they're on their way there, and Ray calls home to tell Annie he's with Mann, and they're on their way to Minnesota. Meanwhile, back at the farm, unbeknownst to Ray, Mark and his partners are there, and they're pushing Annie to sell the farm.
Right.
She doesn't tell him, but we see that happen.
Right.
It's getting serious now.
Yep.
And then, still part of the approach, Ray and Terrence go to Chisholm to find Moonlight Graham, but he's dead.
Right.
And he has been since 1972. And the lady at the newspaper says he was known as Doc Graham around here. So Terrence and Ray go around the town asking about him. They are digging into this last part of the mystery here, trying to find out why they've been sent. They figured out why they had to go find Terrence Mann, but now it's why are they sent to find Doc Graham? They get no answers. And it turns out Doc Graham wasn't troubled like Shoeless Joe. He didn't get suspended for shady dealings. In fact, after he left baseball, he became a small town hero. He was famously devoted to his wife. He made a huge difference in the community. He provided free medical care and food and milk to needy kids and, got them baseball tickets. Ray had to find Shoeless Joe because Shoeless Joe had a problem, but Moonlight Graham appears to have been a model citizen. So this is the approach to the mystery is falling apart here.
Agreed.
This is like the end of there are no more clues what's happening.
Right.
So that's where I see the approach ending.
Just a side note here. The stories that the townsfolk of Chisholm, Minnesota are telling about Doc Graham are real stories told by real people who knew the real Doc Graham.
Really?
So the man who tells the story about how the shopkeepers knew to stock blue hats in their stores because if Doc Graham walked by and saw it, he would buy one for his wife.
Wow. And
that after Doc Graham passed, they found boxes and boxes of blue hats that he hadn't gotten around to giving his wife yet.
Wow.
That was a real story. And so I was going to say the actor, but the man who's telling that story to Terry Mann, he actually knew that. So the tears you see in that man's eyes,
wow.
I think those are authentic.
Wow.
That's a real memory.
No idea. I remember watching that scene and thinking, there's always guys like that in Cameron Crowe movies where they have 2 lines and they deserve 9 Oscars. And I remember thinking, that guy's amazing. And then you cut to James Earl Jones and he has this giant grin on his face. And you can just tell James Earl Jones is in that moment really enjoying this scene. Maybe that's why, because it was a real dude. And James Earl Jones is like, holy crap, I'm talking to a real dude about this real guy.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I thought that's kind of cool.
Ordeal. The hero faces the ultimate test, often risking death to overcome his worst fear, sometimes appearing actually to die. This is the part in the analysis where I went back and forth and back and forth, and I dug back into Christopher Vogler, and I was reading that section that you brought up last time about, the delayed crisis. And I'm really glad we had that discussion last episode, and I'm really glad we did this movie because I went back and reread the Vogler approach, Ordeal, and Seizing the Sword, and really got clear that I've been misinterpreting in a lot of ways what the ordeal is. And maybe it's because we use the word ordeal or the word climax and the word crisis. I always feel like the thing that I pick for the ordeal isn't ordeal-y enough because the real exciting stuff happens at the end of the movie, and shouldn't that be the ordeal? And this movie really brought me some clarity. I did do a lot of thinking and rewriting, and I had my little bullet points, and I kept moving them to different sections.
Yeah.
That night, they're in Chisholm, Minnesota. Ray finds a newspaper article that says Terrence Mann's gone missing, and his father has reported him missing. So James Earl Jones has to call his dad. And he has this great moment where he goes, what am I going to tell my dad?
Yeah.
Like, sorry, I left to go, chase down a dead baseball player. So that night, Ray takes a walk all by himself, and suddenly he's in the year 1972. The Godfather's on the marquee. The cars are all from the 70s. It doesn't appear to be a dream sequence. This is actually happening. And he meets Doc/Moonlight Graham on the street and walks with him and listens to his story. And Moonlight talks about how he only played one inning of one game in the majors as a right fielder. He didn't even get to make a play.
Right.
When the season ended, he knew he was going to get sent back down to the minors, and he couldn't bear it, so he quit. He got this close to his dream, but it passed him by, just like Ray's father. Almost exactly what happened to Ray's father. And Ray asks him, I just realized now why I'm here is to ask you what your wish is. And he says,
I never got to bat in the major leagues. I'd have liked to have that chance, just once. To stare down a big league pitcher. To stare him down, and just as he goes into his windup, wink. Make him think you know something he doesn't. That's what I wish for. Chance to squint at a sky so blue that it hurts your eyes just to look at it. To feel the tingle in your arm as you connect with the ball. To run the bases. Stretch a double into a triple and flop face first into third. Wrap your arms around the bag. That's my wish, Rick and Silla.
It's not even that he wants to hit a home run. He wants to hit a triple. I thought that was such a great moment. And so Ray says, well, there's a place where that can happen, and you're invited. And Graham declines. Now, here he is, presented with the opportunity to leave his current life behind him and live his dream, and he's not interested. He says, nope, my wish will have to remain a wish. Ray says, some men would call getting that close and missing the dream a tragedy. And Graham says, if I'd only gotten to be a doctor for 5 minutes, that would be a tragedy. There's so many parts of Campbell's ordeal in here. I dug back into Vogler for this. There's a subsection of the ordeal called Witness to Sacrifice, where the hero may not do the sacrifice himself, but he witnesses it. Moonlight becoming Doc Graham and sacrificing his baseball dream so that he could serve a community.
Right.
Ray sees that happen and it reacts to it like, how could you not pursue your dream? This whole movie is about pursuing dreams. I'm here to offer you that chance and you're not doing it? How does that even make sense? There's a taste of death is one of the subsections, and it's not only the death of Moonlight Graham, but the death of his dream. Like, they show up there and he's dead.
Yeah.
And then they find him and, my dream is dead, and that's okay. And then facing the shadow, the hero facing his worst fear. And Ray faces his worst fear, which is growing old, having never achieved his dream. He says that right at the beginning, I don't want to be like my dad. And here's Moonlight, who's okay with not having faced his dream, which is almost even more terrifying.
But he fulfilled something else.
Right.
He had a full life, and he was an important and well-respected man.
Yes. But at this point in the movie, Ray's not really wrapping his brain around that.
Right.
He's really focused on this baseball dream. He sees Moonlight Graham. He doesn't see Doc Graham.
Right.
So Ray calls home, and Annie wakes up and tells him, Mark and his partners have bought our mortgage from the bank. They own the paper now, and they're threatening to foreclose. And Ray says, I got to go drop Terrence off in Boston, and then I'll be home. And Terrence says, nope, I'm coming to Iowa. I got to see this field. So to me, that's the ordeal.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Oh. How is that? Is it an ordeal for Ray because he can't fathom how he can be offering wish fulfillment to somebody and they are rejecting the opportunity?
I think my explanation of reward seizing the sword will elucidate that greatly. But essentially, Ray is stripped down to just him. His allies are gone. He's by himself. He goes into this dark place of it's night, and suddenly he's in 1972. And he faces down this guy who is essentially what his father might have been if his father had survived, which is a whole human being who never lived his dream. And he's okay with it. The point of the ordeal is that it changes the hero in some fundamental way. And what happens in the next scene couldn't have happened unless he had this one experience alone by himself. So when we get to reward seizing the sword, that's kind of where you'll see that the changes that are present in Ray could only have happened had he faced down that shadow of growing old, having missed that dream. Reward seizing the sword. Having faced his worst fear, the hero seizes the object of his quest. Ray and Terrence get back in the VW bus and they head for home. I really wanted to fit this in Road Back because they're literally on the road back.
Yeah, me too, but it just wasn't there.
So on the way back, they pick up a hitchhiker, and he turns out to be young Moonlight Graham. He's traveling around the Midwest because he says their teams will find players a day job so they can play ball nights and weekends. So he's looking for a baseball team who'll have him, which is exactly what Ray's dad did in the 20s.
Right. So this is like 1922 Archibald Graham.
Right. Again, here's Ray's father, the father energy. And Ray is telling Terrence about how his father never made it into the majors. And so he tried to live vicariously through Ray and used to make Ray play baseball. And he tells Terrence he started refusing to play catch with him when he turned, like around the time he turned 14. And he told his father, Ray told his father, I could never respect a man whose hero was a criminal. And that hero was Shoeless Joe, and his father died before he could take it back.
Yeah.
So this is where we get how broken their relationship was, how wrapped around baseball it was, and how Shoeless Joe is the symbol of this broken relationship. Terrence says,
This is your penance.
I know. I can't bring my father back.
So the least you can do is bring back his hero.
And so Terrence says now he knows everybody's reason for being here except his own. And here's why I think this is reward seizing the sword. Vogler has a subheading in this chapter called New Perceptions. Heroes may find that surviving death grants new powers or better perceptions. By confronting Doc Graham about Doc surrendering his dream, Ray has gained a new power and a new perception. Moonlight is the first player to appear not in the cornfield, but out in the real world. That's a new power. Ray has extended the magic of the field beyond the boundaries of the farm. Ray also knows why he's doing all this now. He knows it's to honor his father. And he said it explicitly, I'm bringing my dad's heroes back to atone with the father. Now, atonement with the father is a critical motif in the hero's journey. And we see it everywhere, but we see a hint of it here. And of course, there's more to come. So, they get back to the farm. Annie gets to meet Terrence Mann, one of her heroes for whose books she's been advocating. This is a reward for her faith in her husband. It's a reward for Ray, too, because he gets validated by the fact that he was able to get Terrence to come. Terrence, who turns out to be a huge closet baseball fan, gets to see the field and meet Shoeless Joe. This is a reward for his faith in, okay, let's go to Minnesota and find Moonlight. Moonlight Graham gets to meet the other players and finally gets his chance at bat in the major leagues. This is his reward. The details in this movie. So he doesn't get his triple, but in true Doc Graham fashion, he gets to sacrifice himself for an RBI. I thought that was such a great touch.
Very well done. And he's not done sacrificing yet.
The end of that sequence, which in my eyes is the end of Act 2, is Ray looking back at Moonlight, who smiles at him, and Ray smiles back. And I took this exchange to mean that Ray is starting to understand that his purpose is making other people's dreams come true.
Right.
He's just provided that, and he sees himself in Doc. Sacrifice, that's the dream come true.
Okay, it's time for the 7th inning stretch.
So good, Dan.
We'll be right back with Act 3.
So this is the part of the podcast where we try a beverage. Ooh.
What do you think is in this? The type of beverage? How much do you trust me?
I trust you quite a bit.
Okay.
Oh, it's very light.
Is it?
Yeah, it's very lightweight. I expected it to be heavier.
should weigh 24 ounces.
Wait. AleSmith San Diego Pale Ale, $3.94.
AleSmith Brewing Company is based in San Diego, California, home of the
Padres.
National League West San Diego Padres, who are a division rival of my Los Angeles Dodgers.
The Brooklyn Boston
What
Sox.
you are holding in your hands is their San Diego Pale Ale 394, which is brewed in honor of Tony Gwynn, who was the
Tony Gwynn.
Padres all-star outfielder for 20 seasons. 394 is significant because that is his career-high batting average, 394 in a single season.
Wow.
He achieved that during the 1994 season, which is also the year you and I graduated high school.
Wow. This is a deep connection.
Tony Gwynn was an amazing hitter, just like Shoeless Joe Jackson was. He was a 15-time All-Star. He was awarded 7 Silver Sluggers, 5 Golden Glove Awards.
Wow.
He was the National League batting champion 8 times in his 20 seasons.
Wow.
So good is his hitting that today the National League batting champion is known as the Tony Gwynn batting champion.
So for those of our listeners who, like me, have a vague grasp on the specifics of baseball, what does a 394 batting average signify?
Very simply, just the percentage of hits per at-bats.
So he gets on base 40% of the time?
Nearly 40% of the time.
Wow.
For that one season. Anytime he played a full season, he never hit below 309, which is incredible.
Let's crack this open here.
AleSmith Brewing Company recommends you enjoy San Diego Pale Ale 394 from a pint glass.
Oh,
and
okay.
I have 2 ready.
I love it.
Now take a look at that glass.
Father's Day 2012. And yours is
And
a Father Day.
Mine is Father's Day.
2017.
We're talking about Field
Wow.
of Dreams, which is very much about...
Apotheosis with the Father Ale. We should start our own brewing company and have all the beers be related to the hero's journey in some way.
Wow. That's a really great idea.
Archetype Amber.
Threshold Guardian Goza. That is beautiful.
All right, here we go.
Gorgeous.
Beautiful apple juice kind of color here.
Yeah.
Not too foamy, but it's got a little bit of a head on it. It's very floral. It's very citrusy. Take a sip. Ooh,
I like it.
that is delicious.
Yeah. That is way smooth.
It doesn't have that bitter finish. It's got kind of a sweet, malty
Yes.
finish.
Yeah.
And that citrus kind of bites at the edges of your tongue. All right, well, we're going to enjoy our San Diego 394 Pale Ale by AleSmith, and we'll be back with Act 3.
All right, Jeff. So I know we're dipping into Act 3 now.
Right.
The moment that I thought was the ordeal hasn't even arrived for you yet. So I'm curious to know what you consider this moment. And for me, the ordeal is when Ray and his new companions return home. Mark arrives and hands Ray a contract and says,
Ray, you're bankrupt! I'm offering you a way to keep your home because I love my sister. Now, my partners, Ray, they don't give a damn about you, and they're ready to foreclose right now.
And at that moment, Ray is faced with a massive choice.
Yeah.
Do I save my family financially, or do I continue to believe in this magic that has driven me through this adventure? And it's a huge moment. At that time, little Karen, in her mentor moment, says, Daddy, you don't have to sell. People will come. And then Terrence Mann backs Karen up and says, people will come, Ray. People most definitely will come. All the players have stopped their game and are watching Terrence Mann deliver this soliloquy.
This field, this game, is a part of our past, Ray. It reminds us of all that once was good, and it could be again. Oh, people will come, Ray. People will most definitely come.
For me, this was the ordeal for Ray. Now, you can dive into your Act 3.
Right.
I just wanted to get that expressed.
Sure. When I had finished watching the movie for the first time, I mean, not the first time I'd ever seen it, but the first time for this podcast, that was my initial reaction, was that this is the ordeal. And so I did what you did, which is I went back to Vogler and I reread Ordeal and I reread all the sections from the third act. And that was when I kind of wrapped my brain around the difference between what Vogler calls crisis and what he calls climax. Arguably, the crisis is a turning point in the hero's understanding of the reality he's facing. and the climax is the highest point of tension. In a really well-constructed Hollywood narrative, they're two separate things. In this movie, I see that climax as what you just described, but distinct from the ordeal. In other words, that Ray's decision to not sell the farm and continue his leap of faith that the magic of this field is going to sustain him and his family. I see that as part of the third act. Act 3 begins with the road back. The hero is pursued by vengeful forces he disturbed when he sees the sword. So as you mentioned, Mark shows up on the farm the next day. He walks right through the game.
That was funny.
They shot that in such a way that it looks like the ball barely misses his head as he's walking through this game. It must have been a perspective thing, but he walks right through the game because he can't see the players, and he demands that Ray sell the farm or they have to foreclose. For the second time, Karen, the daughter, is the voice of reason. She says, "Daddy, you don't have to sell the farm." And Mark's like starting to talk over her, and Ray goes, "Wait a minute." And he turns to listen to his daughter because she was right before. Terrence agrees with Karen, and he stands up and gives this amazing speech about baseball and the innocence of childhood and how people are going to be moved emotionally to remember what it was like when they were kids. So he says,
And they'll watch the game, and it'll be as if they'd dipped themselves in magic waters.
So there's our baptism.
Uh-huh. Oh, wow. Nicely done.
We haven't had a baptism in a couple episodes, so it was time. So now it's Terrence versus Mark. They're sort of cutting back and forth.
Yep.
And and everyone is waiting to see what Ray's decision, and that's where Shoeless Joe gets into that game stance again.
Yeah.
There's a callback to that first scene. And so finally Ray says, "I'm not signing." Mark absolutely blows up. And in this moment, he truly becomes the villain. Up until now, he's claimed that the only reason he's doing this is because he wants what's best for his sister. He's doing this out of love so they can stay on their land. But here, he turns really ugly. He's infuriated by Ray's idealism. And you really get the sense from his performance that he lost something too. And that's what he's been fighting for this whole time, is to prove that his way is really the right way. It's almost like there's some childhood dream that he's given up on. He's so personal in this moment. And so he gets really upset. And in his frustration, Mark grabs Karen.
You build a baseball field in the middle of nowhere, and you sit here and you stare at nothing.
Not nothing.
And you turn your daughter into a damn space
Get your hands off
I'm trying to help you, damn it!
And she falls from the bleachers and is knocked unconscious. And here's where we get Rescue from Without.
Yeah.
Young Moonlight Graham steps out of the field and he's old again. He becomes Doc Graham.
Right.
And he approaches Karen, discovers she's choking on something, and he revives her. And I have to add this point. Doc Graham died in 1972. So he doesn't know the Heimlich maneuver, because the Heimlich maneuver was developed in 1974. So he doesn't use the Heimlich maneuver. He slaps her back.
Slaps her on the back.
And I just thought, wow, that's attention to detail.
Right.
It was 2 years off. How great, again, the detail of this movie, that's how Doc Graham would have solved the problem. And she's choking on a hot dog, which is what you eat at a baseball game. Every single detail of this movie is right. This was Rescue from Without. Right? Karen represents Ray's idealism, and she almost dies, and Doc revives it.
Right. Sacrifices himself.
Sacrifices himself because now he can't go back onto the field.
Right.
Another part of the road back is crossing of the return threshold. Mm-hmm. So the hero has crossed into the special world and accomplished some great task. He's seized otherworldly knowledge, enlightenment, essentially, and now he has to bring it back to the ordinary world. So now that Moonlight has stepped over the boundary, has crossed that threshold, he can't go back. He's sacrificed himself again, reminding Ray that this is his job too, to make the dreams of others come true, to repair the damage that he did by refusing to honor his father's baseball dream. He refused to even play catch with his dad. All his dad wanted was to play ball with his son, and he refused.
Right.
So as Moonlight crosses the threshold and goes back into the corn and disappears, Shoeless Joe Jackson tells Doc, "You were good."
Yeah.
And we see that glimmer of fulfillment in Burt Lancaster's eye. That's what he needed. He needed to get recognized by a hero for being a good ball player.
Wow, I saw that completely different.
Oh, really?
I thought that glimmer that you saw, I saw the same glimmer, but I interpreted it as sadness. Had he stuck with baseball, he could have been good.
And then the final stage that I see in this road back is refusal of the return. So Shoeless Joe invites Terrence to come into the corn with him, but he doesn't invite Ray. And Ray is furious. He says, "Hey, I built
so
this field.
Offended.
I've done everything I was asked to do. What's in it for me?" And this is Ray This is Ray refusing to fully, even though he's had the experience with Moonlight Graham and he knows that his role is to bring back his father's hero, to reconnect with his dad. He's refusing to accept his role as dream provider instead of dream pursuer. And Shoeless Joe even says,
"Is that why you did this? For you?"
And Terrence talks him down. You know, they have that great fight about,
You lied to me.
But you were kidnapping me at the time, you big jerk.
Well, you lied to me.
You said your finger was a gun.
to me, that is the road back.
I can get on board with that. I think where we differ massively is what the ultimate boon is. And, you know, we disagree on that in just about every episode. But to me, the ultimate boon is about to happen. It is seconds away from where we are right now in our discussion.
I encourage you to go back and reread Vogler's chapter about Reward seizing the sword and what the ultimate boon actually is in the function of the story, because I think the temptation is to call whatever the most important win in the movie is the ultimate boon. But remember, seizing the sword is something you seize so you can fight a last battle. So winning that last battle is something you do having seized the sword.
What's getting me is just the word ultimate.
I think the term ultimate boon is misleading, especially in the context of modern day storytelling. Like you said, the word ultimate makes you believe this has to be the biggest moment. That term ultimate boon, we have to reclaim that for what it means in the context of the hero's journey.
Yeah.
To reclaim that.
So Master of Two Worlds, or in Vogler's terms, resurrection. The hero is purified by death either in a literal or symbolic way and returns to the land of the living a changed person. Resurrection has occurred throughout this film. The whole movie is the resurrection of various important people that lead Ray to his final resurrection of his father.
I agree with that.
As for Master of Two Worlds, when Ray rejects Mark's offer to buy the farm, that is Ray accepting that I can be faithful to this project and I can believe in the magic, but I can still be successful as a father and a husband and as a farmer. That is his belief that he can succeed doing both things.
Yeah, that's a great analysis. Karen appears to die but is saved by Doc Graham.
Yes.
So that's a resurrection. Mark, who was blind to the magic of the field, can now see the players and insists, Ray, you can't sell the farm.
Yeah.
This is amazing. And he's a complete 180. Doc Graham resurrects his hope when he saves Karen, and all of a sudden Mark is in the fold. Terrence is resurrected as a writer. Before he walks into the corn, he tells Ray, I'm going to write about this. And before his career was dead, he hadn't written anything for 20 years. And then, of course, the final and most poignant resurrection, Shoeless Joe repeats to Ray, if you build it, he will come. And the catcher takes his mask off. Mm-hmm. And it's Ray's dad.
Yeah.
And the he in He Will Come isn't Shoeless Joe.
Right.
It's Ray's father.
Been John Kinsella the whole time.
He's resurrected too. And I just, at that point, had to wipe my eyes because it was so beautiful.
I watched this movie 3 times to prepare for this podcast, and I wept every single time, even though I knew it was coming.
The final stage.
Freedom to live, or return with the elixir. The hero, having won some precious treasure or reward, now returns to the ordinary world to share the spoils of battle. This segment of the film is encompassed by the last 2 lines of dialogue of the film.
Hey, Dad? You want to have a catch?
I'd like that.
And then the end of the film is them playing catch as the camera cranes up. The sun is setting, and we see for miles lines of cars heading toward the baseball field. During some of my research of this movie, I learned that Dwyer Brown, the actor who plays John Kinsella, his father had passed away just before he had to film his scenes for this movie. So when Kevin Costner as Ray asks, hey, Dad, you want to have a catch? And Dwyer Brown responds, I'd like that. There's a catch in his voice.
Yeah.
I don't think that was acting.
No.
Again, that just waterworks.
Yeah.
I lost it.
To have that gift to be able to work that out and mourn your dad in a way that moved other people, there's no better reason to be an artist.
Right.
I would add a couple things to Return with the Elixir. Ray says to Joe, it was you, meaning you were the voice, you were the one calling me. And Joe says, no, Ray, it was you. And so in a classic fantasy trope, it was Ray's voice all along. Ray's been guiding himself. He's been following his dream from within, which of course is his atonement with the Father. The other thing I wanted to point out is Ray's dad says, heaven is a place where dreams come true. And Ray says, maybe this is heaven. Because before, someone asked him,
Hey! Is this heaven? No. It's Iowa.
The central message of the movie is encapsulated in that exchange because heaven is where you are now. Ray has atoned with his father and he has followed his dream. So he's honored his dad and not become his dad. That's all the master of both worlds.
Beautiful.
Wow, there was way less disagreement than I thought. We kind of found our way through it, Dan. I'm proud of us.
Hey, Jeff, you want to play catch?
I'd like that. That's it for this episode. Join us next month when we will be analyzing the 2016 Oscar winner for Best Picture, Moonlight.
La La Land. Oh no, we got it wrong. We got it wrong.
Moonlight is what we will be analyzing.
If you like what you heard, please be sure to subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcast.
And if you love what you heard, please leave us a rating and a review and tell your friends to listen.
Thanks to Taylor Jordan for our Hero's Journey fanfare and bumper music. You can check him out at dramatics.net, dramatics with an X, and to Dean Effington at DAE Design for our logo. I'm digging this Ale Smith Tony Gwynn 394 Pale Ale.
I think it hit it out of the park. Field of Dreams is copyright 1989 Universal Pictures.
We're proud to be part of the 1888 Center family of podcasts. 1888 serves as a regional catalyst for the preservation, presentation, and promotion of cultural heritage and literary arts.
You can visit the center's cafe, gallery, and bookshop physically in historic downtown Orange or online at 1888.center.
Please follow us on Twitter at Heroes Podcast. You can like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Heroes Journey Podcast, and check out our hilarious and informative show notes at heroesjourneypodcast.com.
Until next time,
journey on.